Welcome back to another episode of the Chuck Toddcast. It is day 2 in my sort of new world here. And for my friends now on YouTube, hopefully you are liking and subscribing. I'm still learning the lingo, so cut me a little bit of slack there. For episode 1, I was able to talk about the post-election fallout of April 1st, and that was just sort of the first temperature check, right? In a conversation I had with Chris Saliz, I said, it's like, if you're a college basketball fan, it's like watching those tournaments that take place in Hawaii over the holidays. They count. They're real regular season games. They give you a sense of who's good, who's not, etc. But it is not the be all end all. But it's a temperature check. You really get to find out what's your team made of. And I think now we got a temperature check, and we found out a few things that really haven't changed, right? Number one is we still have the shotgun Trump voters, as I mentioned yesterday. When Trump's not on the ballot, there is clearly a 5 to 10 point disadvantage for any Republican running. Democrats are a bit more fired up right now. Frankly, I think there was a little bit of a question. How fired up would the party be? There's been a lot of disillusionment. You've seen these town halls have gotten people fired up, but you've also seen Democrats get cranky at other Democrats because they don't think that they're fighting hard enough. I think there was some concern, and some Democrats I talked to, that maybe some would sit on their hands. Well, you didn't have that. So you clearly were starting to see in some ways a similar pattern take shape that we saw, frankly, in the first in 2017 during the first Trump turn, and you saw it really in 2021 going in to Biden's one term there, that the pattern of the party out of power suddenly looks more appealing, because what we're really in is an era of voters telling us what they don't like. We've now had 3 straight presidential elections where voters have voted against. They've told us they voted who they didn't want. They didn't want Hillary Clinton as president, so Donald Trump became president. They didn't want a second Donald Trump term, so Joe Biden became president. They didn't want a Kamala Harris / Biden second term, so we ended up with Donald Trump. And how do you know that that's the case? Because look how quickly Trump's approval rating fell. It fell even faster than Biden's. And what's instructive, I think, right, about all of them is that Trump won, Biden won, and Trump 2, is that in all cases, they started with a little bit of a honeymoon, not a great one, but somewhere in the 50% mark. And it's almost like the first crisis dipped them and they never recovered. Trump really never recovered from sort of the initial sort of chaos of the first 90 days of administration, the travel ban, the in and out, all the different fired members, firing James Comey, the launch of the special counsel probe, right? So there was all this chaos, and it sort of kept his approval ratings in the mid-40s. With Joe Biden, he sort of hung in there until the Afghanistan withdrawal debacle. He dipped below 45, never recovered. I frankly assume that Donald Trump doesn't get over 45 for the rest of his presidency. Now, if it happens, I'm going to assume it's some outside event that we don't know about, that essentially where the country does the rally around the flag. That's, to me, the only way you would see his numbers go up, because he almost seems intent on creating such a disruptive presidency that it's almost inevitable that you're gonna have this negativity. The question I have for the Democrats is this: are they ready to truly sort of have the fight to figure out who they are? I think the Democrats have to be careful here. They have the one advantage they're going. There's a majority coalition in this country that doesn't like Trumpism or Trump himself. They don't like his philosophy in the economy. They don't like his philosophy in foreign policy. They don't like his philosophy, and certainly don't like his character, et cetera. But the problem for the Democrats is there's a slice of these anti-Trump folks, or folks that are not comfortable with Trump, who don't trust the Democratic Party, who view the Democratic Party as too far to the left, who view the Democratic Party as too out of touch. Maybe they're uncomfortable with their economic policies. They're uncomfortable with their cultural things. So the Democrats have to figure out, can they develop a message that figures out how to talk to the, say, 55% total who will get comfortable enough to say, okay, we trust you to govern. And I think the question is going to be, is it going to be as simple as the party having the same debate that they had in 1988 after they lost that. And you had the rise of Bill Clinton, who was sort of a pro-business Democrat, who sort of beat back Jesse Jackson at the time, who was sort of the leader of the more liberal wing of the party. Is it something like that? If it is, and it's pretty simple, okay. And then you start to look out for sort of governors who start to find that space. You see Rahm Emanuel, who's not a former governor, but a former mayor of Chicago. He's trying to sort of sit in that pro-business space. In fact, he just took a job with a private equity firm. I don't think that, 10 years ago, that would have been seen as a decision somebody makes on the Democratic side if they're not going to run for president, because the assumption would be there's no way you could win a primary if you were somehow part of private equity. I think Rahm Emanuel is trying to bet differently on that. I think you might see some other governors, whether it's Andy Beshear or Josh Shapiro, try to sort of remove themselves a little bit, at least from the cultural stereotypes that have been seen as a negative for the Democratic side. But I would say this: I do wonder if there is such exhaustion with and such disappointment with both parties, that the thing the Democrats have to, I think, be really worried about is if there is true disruption, not just inside their own party, which could be healthy. I would argue whatever you think of Donald Trump disrupted the Republican Party on the inside, created a big fight, and in essence built a new coalition that we're going to find out how durable it is. It turns out I don't think it's very durable if Donald Trump's not on the ballot. But he built a coalition that was successful. He won the popular vote for the first time. He's figured out how to win. He's created a working class coalition that is beyond just white working class voters. That's an impressive feat as far as political organizing is concerned. And if the Democrats get disrupted internally, it could be a healthy thing. That's what Bill Clinton did. But what if the disruption comes from the outside? What if these independent candidacies, we've got a big one in Michigan with the Detroit mayor running for governor as an independent. I'd be keeping an eye out on California. I certainly don't think a conventional Democrat is what Californians are going to want to see for a fifth straight term, right? They've had they've had 4 straight gubernatorial elections that they've won. Will they win a fifth with somebody whose title is U.S. Senator, former U.S. Senator, former Vice President, Lieutenant Governor? Or is the only way the Democrats win a fifth, sort of a fifth straight term in California is they have some outsider, somebody who hasn't held elected office? Or does somebody say, you know what, I'm going to run as an independent, see if I can peel off the third of Republican voters that live out in California, get some sort of pro-business Democrats and create a new coalition? And I think that is why there is, I think, some urgency on the Democratic Party side to sort of show some openness to debate, and not, go ahead and have a fight, but almost be open to having the debate inside your tent. Because if they had all tried to sort of squelch this, I think you could start to see more interest in that. And, one word of warning on there. I've often wondered, for instance, if when it comes to Israeli politics, I joke, have we exported our politics to Israel, or is Israel exporting their divisive politics to us? 30 years ago, there was a robust left of center party called the Labor Party in Israel, won a lot of elections. The first election of Bibi Netanyahu seemed to fracture, and it was sort of, in many ways, the Israeli left has been obsessed with defeating Netanyahu so much it has crumbled the Labor Party. And in order to defeat Netanyahu or come up with different coalitions to do it, they sort of have to grab, let's try this. They've created new parties to try to beat him, and they've won a couple of times. But there is no sort of center of gravity for the left of center political movement in Israel the way there used to be. And that, to me, is the risk that Democrats have in this moment, that if they can't continue to just organize themselves around being anti-Trump, because at some point you sort of lose your own brand. And it's possible, frankly, that over the last 3 presidential elections, by organizing themselves, which, look, in fairness to them, it certainly looked like a good strategy in 2016. It was a good strategy in 20 since they won, and they got really close doing it again in 24. But is it really a long-term strategy? And in some ways, are you seeing that some diminishing returns here? So it's something that I've been holding off on saying, something I probably would have written a month ago if I'd had a place to write it. This is something I wanted to share now. So it is, I'm hoping that we start to see more of these robust debates, whether it's a Gavin Newsom, a Cory Booker, a John Fetterman. The louder these fights are inside the Democratic Party, ironically, it may be a sign of real health, because I think if you look at the fights inside the Republican Party, it is actually, over the last decade, been a net positive for them, not necessarily a net negative. All right, I'm going to quick sneak a break in here. And when we come back, my conversation with the man who probably knows more about what's happening on Congress than any other individual in Washington, D.C. that's not named Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, and that is Jake Sherman, the founder of Punchbowl News. And joining me now is Jake Sherman. He is founder, one of the poobahs of Punchbowl. For those that may not know what Punchbowl is, I think it's the only way to understand Congress, the only people that cover Congress correctly and well and thoroughly. I'm not saying there aren't others that do it sporadically well, but you guys are doing it at such a granular level that I don't think anybody else can match it. But give me your elevator pitch on Punchbowl these days.
Yeah, well, thank you, Chuck. We started almost 4.5 years ago now. Myself, Anna Palmer, and John Bresnahan all worked, and Rachel Schindler. We all worked together at Politico for many years. And in 2020, COVID, we were just like, we gotta do something on our own. We had written a book, which our first appearance was with you, Chuck. So that was very nice. In 2019, and we just kind of were ready to spread our wings. This was at the end of 2020. 2021. I mean, we said, what would we do if we started a publication like when we could do anything and we could cover Congress anyway? And we said we would focus on the leadership and kind of the circles that run around the leadership and the incentives and the inside game, and use that to illustrate policy and politics. Power, people, politics are our motto. So that's number one. Number two, we've now expanded into a bunch of new areas. Financial services and tech were our first two kind of verticals, and we cover that like we cover everything else, which is focus on the people that matter, not the noise. So like on the main, like with us, we don't cover like Marjorie Taylor Greene as much as we cover Mike Johnson, right? We cover Mike Johnson, the leadership. In tech, we cover the chairs of the committees. And now we've moved into a new realm, and this will be my last part of the elevator pitch. We've acquired about 18 months ago, 20 months ago, maybe, a data company, data about Congress, called Electo, and we've turned that into something called the Portal, which is a data platform for everything Congress. And we've built something called NBlock AI, which for you, you would love a ton, because what it basically does is it combines all the databases in DC, legislation, directories, soon regulations, congressional record, and you could just type in, show me every time I'm just going to use Marjorie Taylor Greene because she's on the tip of my tongue. Marjorie Taylor Greene voted with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and it comes up with an answer. So like things that would take you otherwise hours to find out. And we built it with like our brains in mind. Like if you were building something like this, you would know what you would be looking for. So Brez and I sat down and we're like, how would we build this? And we went about doing that.
Do you see yourself as a high-end trade publication, not for the masses, or do you want to do a little bit more for the masses? Look, I don't, I always talked about the old, the hotline, sort of the godfather of this newsletter business.
Yes, that's right.
I always have emphasized that we were not trying to write for the masses. And I think, frankly, some of the mistakes that the Note made and Politico made, in some ways, was trying to take insider information and make it for the masses, which frankly probably perverted political journalism for a while.
Yeah, we know where our bread is buttered and who our audience is. And our audience is the Speaker of the House, his staff, the Senate Majority Leader, Senate Minority Leader, House Minority Leader, and everybody who needs to understand granularly
Right.
what they're thinking and what they're doing. And what Anna, who my co-founder or CEO, always
Right.
says, if my mother in North Dakota, and her mother is in North Dakota, wants to read and come along for the ride, then like, great. And if
Sure.
not, but we're never gonna be for the masses.
You're
We
not
are
there to make
for
money off of Anna's mother in North Dakota.
no.
That's not the business model.
That's
right?
not the business model. The business model is this building that I'm sitting in now, the Capitol, and
Yep.
all of the concentric circles that revolve around the Capitol, which, by the way, include Wall Street, include Silicon Valley,
Right.
include, the oil and gas business, include, all sorts of parts of the country. Those are the people that we really target.
So let's talk
reporting.
about where I'm going to signpost here. We're talking on a Wednesday afternoon on April 2nd. And you're frankly not as busy as I think you should be right at this moment.
Right.
Congress abruptly left town. It had to do with the speaker not being happy by a forced vote on him. I guess it was a discharge petition. My apologies for using that kind of lingo for those. But essentially, that some members of Congress, led by a former Freedom Caucus, I say former because I believe Anna Luna has now quit the Freedom Caucus, who was trying to allow proxy voting for essentially maternal and paternity leave, and I'm going to guess any sort of major health crisis where you were going to be away, either a family member, et cetera, away. Seems like it was interesting that she got some bipartisan support for this.
Yeah, so it was actually just pregnancy. It was
okay. This was just for pregnancy.
Yes.
Okay.
So basically,
not even paternity.
This
would only be for maternity.
Maternity and paternity. Basically, what she did is a discharge petition is a way for somebody who is being ignored by the leadership to get something on the floor. She got 218 signatures, which is the prerequisite, and then that triggers an automatic vote. So Mike Johnson didn't like that. This bill that she triggered a vote on would allow 12 weeks of proxy voting, so you could vote from home. For new dads, new fathers, and expectant and new mothers. So if you have a complicated pregnancy and you can't travel, or you're in your last weeks of your pregnancy and you are just not allowed to travel overall. Most women don't travel in their last X number of weeks. I don't remember for my 3 kids, but in your last
you
couple
certainly
months.
were told. I mean, I remember, don't go on an airplane at 8 months.
Right. So what happened is Johnson doesn't like that. Doesn't like proxy voting. So he embedded in I'm sorry for this is like you're getting the full Capitol experience.
No, you're in the Capitol Hill cubbyhole office. No. This is the action. This is where news is being made.
This is the texture. Yeah. So
it's the sausage.
Mike Johnson put in a unrelated bill, a provision that would kill that petition. He lost. Anna Paulina Luna won, which was very surprising that a member of the rank and file was able to defeat the speaker. She held her coalition together, and Johnson said, forget it. We're going home. We're going to regroup next week. He said this on a Tuesday afternoon. They'd only been in session for about 20 or so hours at that point. Right. So and canceled the week, he was really upset. And he has 2 different things pulling at him.
Let me pause here. Let me pause here. Why did he cancel the week?
So he canceled the week.
He didn't have to cancel the week. Why couldn't they? I mean, this seems like taking his ball and going home.
So, yes, exactly. What he did is he said what he said, and I don't know that this is 100% true. There's some truth to it. The House Freedom Caucus, the hardline members of the House Republican Conference, said, we're not going to vote for anything, any procedural matters, while this discharge petition is live. So if you want our vote, you need to kill this discharge petition. So he has, on the one hand, Anna Paulina Luna, who's pissed off that he's trying to kill her discharge petition. And on the other hand, he has people that are saying, in his narrow majority, he has people who are saying, I'm not going to vote for anything until you kill this discharge petition. So he's torn between these 2 poles, and he felt frozen. Now, this was a little, I haven't said this to Johnson directly, but this is a little bit for effect, because he does have some things he could bring up. For example, on the floor this week was the SAVE Act, a new voter ID requirement. He could bring that up to the floor. He has a special procedure that he could use to bring that to the floor at any point. I think it was for a little bit of effect, and he wanted to let things cool down, and I don't blame him for that part.
Is there some magical math with 2 extra members since he just got the 2 special elections? Does that,
Well, he
in
lost by
theory,
9.
give him a chance to do? I was just going to say,
He
I don't
lost
feel
by
like
9.
the 2, like if you told me, okay, he was waiting for 2 more votes, right?
No, he lost by 9. He really needs to find a way out. That's actually what I'm trying to figure out now. What are the ways out here? How could he bridge this gap? But for Anna Paulina Luna, there's basically no incentive for her to give in because she's won. So Johnson needs to find himself an off ramp that Luna will accept effectively.
And of course, a problem he always has, if Donald Trump doesn't care about an issue, then suddenly Mike Johnson is paralyzed. Is that basically how Congress works right now?
Yeah, I mean, let's put it this way. Anytime Mike Johnson has had a big victory, Donald Trump was instrumental in it. And that goes for his speakership. He won the speakership when Mike Johnson, when Donald Trump weighed in on his behalf. He won, he got a budget resolution, a very difficult spending blueprint through with Donald Trump twisting arms. He's gotten everything through with Trump. And listen, whether you are a righty or a lefty or somewhere in the middle, we can just say this about Donald Trump. He is a singular political figure. I mean, I've
never seen anything like this with a political party.
Yeah.
Obama did not have this kind of sway. He had a lot of sway over the Democratic Party. He did not have this kind of sway.
Yeah, but Chuck, I watched Barack Obama struggle. If you'll remember, on some free trade deals, he had to work with Paul Ryan and the right because his party was revolting against him. Donald Trump is just, I mean, it's remarkable what he can make Republicans do.
But he can't really work with Democrats. I mean, that is, you just pointed out something. Like Obama sometimes could go to Ryan because there was this accepted premise that, hey, sometimes we align more than them. And of course, that was frankly, now we will say another era. Right now, it's so sacrilege to work with the other side. There's nothing to it. But they're really, even in Trump's first term, there was a handful of Democrats he at times could turn to. I don't think that exists right now.
It doesn't. And I will say this, and I'm not talking about policy. Let's just talk about procedure and politics for a second. The biggest strategic problem that Trump has is that he has made himself so toxic among Democrats to work with for a million, reasons that we could talk for 10 podcasts and 10 hours about. Because truly, and we saw this a little bit in the first term in very short spurts, he wanted deals with Democrats. It was something that he was pining for. You know, you saw this.
Right.
You remember he had all these Democrats at the White House on immigration, and he was like, let's do it. Dianne Feinstein, let's do it. And Kevin McCarthy was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, he is somebody that is, wants Democrat, but it's at this point.
Not anymore. This is, and this is something that I think folks don't fully understand. And frankly, I don't think the larger Washington press corps has fully articulated, because I think they don't trust this. And it's as follows. The anger and the grievance and the revenge of Trump is not just Trump now. It really is everybody around him. And this is revenge over being canceled. This is revenge over not getting any jobs on corporate boards when they are out of power. This is revenge for not being able to become professors at university. I say this because it's true, right? You had an establishment, whether it was in media, whether it was in academia, whether it was in the corporate world, who said, you know what? We're not hiring anybody.
That's right.
Trump. Yeah. And so I'm not sitting here saying tit for tat is a good thing or anything. I'm just we sort of need to understand this is the mindset. And so this isn't going to change. There isn't going to be a warming of relations. There isn't going to be negotiations. In fact, I have no idea why these law firms are doing it, because the minute you capitulate once, he's going to keep coming back, right? Seems like with each one. But I do think folks need to understand, hey, when there's that old adage, when you go for the king, you shoot the king, you better not miss.
Yeah. I agree.
And the elite establishment missed. Okay. For a variety of reasons. We can go through it, Mitch McConnell, et cetera, but you missed. And now he's got power, and he's decided to use it to just, I really believe that this isn't ever going to change. There isn't going to be a Donald Trump that in 6 months says, hey, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, let's cut a deal?
There might have to be if the Democrats win the majority, and I don't, in the House, but I don't.
I don't know. I think we're paralyzed.
Well, on some
especially if it's
basic
just the House.
functions like keeping the government open, he's going to have to do something, right? But short of that, I agree with you, and that this is what I tell my friends who are working in other industries, like in Wall Street and on or watching markets and live and die by markets, which is a few things. He has no election in front. I mean, that we know of. He has no election in front of him.
Right.
He's not constrained by typical political considerations that any other politician is constrained by. And he believes, based on my limited understanding, I mean, from the people around him, meaning I'm not talking to him every day, that he's more sure in his decision-making process and his gut and his instinct than ever before. And I think that shows.
Is there anything, I've said, one of the biggest problems, we've got a lot of things to sort of like, how did we get to this moment where all of the power is so concentrated to a few people, right? In the legislative branch, the fact that committee chairs have less say today than they've ever had before, or the fact that we have the imperial presidency, and we only have the imperial presidency because the legislative branch gave all these powers to the presidency. And let's start with this tariff business. Is there any appetite in Congress right now to try to take back some of their authority on tariffs?
No, when I've talked to Johnson about this, this has been whittling and been decreasing for some time. Congress's power not only on things like tariffs, but on a whole host of functions.
Everything. I mean, I joke. It's like, if you want to if you're angry about our president, if you are tired of our presidential elections being this, oh my God, right? It's sort of the Armageddon type elections. Take power away from the presidency. This is not what the founders intended. They wanted the speaker to be the most powerful. Frankly, the most powerful policymaker in the country, did they not?
For sure. And we haven't seen that since, you could make an argument since Jim Wright, to be honest with you.
I might say you have to go back to Rayburn and LBJ, I guess you could say Tip had some power, but still.
For sure. So yes, there's no appetite to do that. There's no appetite for Congress to say, well, listen, there's a vote, and we're, again, as you said, we're talking on April 2nd. There's a vote today on the floor to pass a largely symbolic resolution to disapprove of Trump's national emergency with Canada, which is going to pass. Mitch McConnell.
That's in the Senate. Right?
In the Senate,
just
exactly.
In the Senate, right.
And so it's mostly symbolic. But no, we did it. We wrote this week about how Republicans are worried about the tariff. Don't agree with the tariff situation, but there are those like Jim Jordan and Jason Smith, the Ways and Means chair, say we should just let him do what he's going to do because he knows better than we do. So, and maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but that's how they think.
What do you think how strong is the stomach of these elected Republicans who are going to be on the ballot in 26 as they watch the economy become shakier and shakier and shakier, especially if these tariffs do the damage that a lot of economists expect them to do?
I think it's going to be, you don't want to, we can't predict elections, right? I don't want to, but Republicans have a very narrow majority. And that is why, by the way, the shaky economy is why Republicans are pushing this tax bill so quickly, because they feel like in 2017 they waited too long to get the bounce that they thought would happen from their tax bill. They didn't
it's almost
get
already
it.
Too late though, Jake. The tariffs are ruining whatever. This is where forget whether these are good ideas or not. Just politically, if they wanted these impacts, he should have waited on tariffs 6 months. And he should have just focused on getting his tax cut. He could have probably gotten the tax cut and started the tariffs in Labor Day.
That's
but
the
he
big.
That would have been the. I still think these are terrible ideas, and it's probably going to cause lots of long-term problem. But let's say he is intent on doing it. He's doing this out of order.
Yeah, there's an argument to be made that he should have spent all of his political capital and all of his energy getting the tax and spending
Mm.
cut bill through the House and the Senate first, and see where that netted out, if it gave him some economic cushion, and then moved on to the rest of his
He'd
agenda.
have bought credibility with the business community who desperately wanted this.
Yes, and listen, at the end of the day, I do believe that all the taxes will be extended. I think he will get much of what he wants in the tax space. I don't know about getting as much as what he wants in the spending cut space. He says he wants to
Right.
balance the budget. That ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
So I don't want to mislead here. He's not going to get a balanced budget. But no, the tariff situation is and it is as bad as it could be for House and Senate Republicans who are having a president do something out of their control that will
Yeah.
directly impact them.
Again, I'm going to signpost, the tariffs haven't been announced yet.
Correct.
It's astonishing to me how little information the White House has been sharing even with
Unbelievable.
their allies on Capitol Hill, right?
Unbelievable. I mean, John Thune said to me, or said to one of my colleagues this week, said to us, I don't know what's going to happen. Mike Johnson basically said, not sure, he's going to do what he's going to do.
I don't think Peter Navarro knows what's going to happen. I don't
No,
think
and
Howard
Kevin
Lutnick knows what's
Hassett-
going to happen. I don't
Kevin
think Scott
Hassett-
Bessent. Yeah.
Yeah, he was on one of the shows last weekend and said, he has all the information in front of him. I think he's going to make the right decision. I mean,
Yeah.
this is not the typical decision-making process that we've seen with a president,
Well, part of that is there's no staff. The last Trump administration had a staff around him that some of them had experience on Capitol Hill. So they believed in some of the procedures. Hey, we got to give a heads up to these allies. Hey,
Right.
This team is so inexperienced. In some ways there's a couple of, but it's actually, Susie Wiles has never really worked in Washington. Been a long time since he did. It goes so far back that arguably it's a different Washington.
Oh, for sure.
And you and I have both witnessed chiefs of staff who have not had Washington experience, how much they struggle with it. Obviously there's a ledge affairs person that has some experience, but it's a shockingly inexperienced cabinet outside of Marco Rubio in the ways of Washington.
It completely, and there is a, Trump I don't know how he sees it, but let me put it the way I see it, which is there is tremendous benefit. And I see this in my own everyday job leading a company. There is tremendous benefit in getting people to buy into your plans before you announce them publicly and before you put them into place.
Oh my
and
God.
I see.
By the way, I just was at a company that did a terrible job at that. Okay. At times, and it would blow up in their face. I don't need to, I was involved in one of the incidents. When you don't do that stuff before an announcement, you create all sorts of problems.
And for members of Congress, it makes them a free agent. Right. So they could be like,
yes, it does.
There's actually some benefit for them. They could be like, this isn't me. I didn't have anything to do with this. But it also deprives you of the allies that you need when you need them. And so that's a really difficult dynamic.
Speaking of allies, Elise Stefanik, she's still a Trump ally?
Yeah, probably. I will say this. I found this very interesting. Stefanik, who I've covered since she got to Congress, was offered a leadership post by Mike Johnson and Donald Trump. She relinquished her number 4 post in the House Republican leadership.
She was an elected leader in the House, relinquishes it in order to take this from the
UN
last Congress,
job,
in order to take the UN ambassador job, and then he strips it. Probably correct. I mean, when you look at what happened in Florida, and we have the issue of the shotgun Trump voters who just don't show up when Trump's not on the ballot, coupled with a fired up Dem base. Look, I know her district pretty well. I got relatives that live in her district, and it's right next to Albany in the capital region. That probably would be a coin flip special.
An R+9-ish, and meaning Republicans
but in this
win by
environment,
Yeah. And especially you have the Democrat has already raised $2 million for a special election. In a general election, I don't think that Democrats could win. But to be fair to Mike Johnson, he told Trump not to do this. He made it clear publicly.
Did with Waltz, and I mean, and you can't help but laugh how close we came to Waltz being out of his job by the time his seat was filled. Yeah. I mean, we're arguably. I don't know when the oath is going to happen for Randy Fine, and I'm not sure where Mike Waltz is. I'm sure he wakes up every morning right now wondering, is this my last day? Considering we know how Trump could just make a Truth Social post and end it.
Yeah, Lippin, I think Randy Fine will be sworn in as soon as possible because they need that cushion, along with Jimmy Petronis, right, who's replacing Matt Gaetz. And Petronis and Fine both are long time, pretty established figures in Florida politics, who, by the way, I assume, Chuck, will run away with their seats in November 2026.
Oh, 100%. I mean, look, what's the most unique thing, and I talked about it on my previous podcast, the thing that I think people are misreading about Florida 1 is that, there's Republicans in that district, and it's in Pensacola, and I happen to know it. They have a DeSantis problem. DeSantis has caused all sorts of sometimes all politics actually is local, and he has created a local firestorm over the University of West Florida board. Yeah. And all these local officials are just ticked off at him. Republicans. This is and ironically, the guy who was the chief antagonist to DeSantis in trying to do this was Randy Fine.
Yes.
Yep. It's a fascinating story. But I do think, because to me, the shock wasn't that both of those districts underperformed from 24. It was that I think we all expected Florida 6 to be closer than Florida 1. And when it didn't happen, you're sitting there going, well, on one hand, national money, I think, did rescue Fine and probably boosted him 4 or 5 points. But with Petronis, that was a separate, and it is very DeSantis caused. It's a fascinating little problem.
Yeah, well, yes, I agree with everything you said. I was talking to Max Cohen, who covers in part House races and Senate races for us, and he said this morning the same thing. They both underperformed, and which tells him it's also a structural problem for Republicans right now. And I think that's worth keeping in mind. And I saw out of the corner of my eye, I didn't study personally, but I think the military and government heavy parts of that first district are where the military bases. Yes. Underperformed even more so in that Petronis, the former Gates seat.
Look, Escambia County, which is Pensacola, it's where the naval base is. She carried it. The Democrat carried the county. The last time any Democrat carried that county in any election was Bill Nelson, 2006, Mr. Sherman.
And that's a different world than it is now. That's the world where there were, I don't remember, but there were many Florida Democrats. There were people like Alan Boyd who were representing that must have been
Florida
that was
2.
that,
yeah,
that was Florida,
it was the adjacent district.
Right, the adjacent district, right. So, I mean, here's my thing. We were talking about this morning. If you are a Republican right now and you look at Wisconsin and you look at Florida and you look at the nationwide poll numbers and you look at the tariffs and you look at all these things and you say, we're in a great political position, then I can't take you that seriously. And
actually, so the canary in the coal mine on this is going to be if we suddenly see some Republican retirements in the next 6 months, or if we suddenly see Republicans looking, hey, maybe this is the time I'm going to go run for attorney general in my state, or I'm going to go run for something, because if you run for Congress, you're defending Trump and Musk. Right now, you can't run your own race.
Agree. And I think on top of that, there are a lot of people that I talk to on an everyday basis, members of Congress, who are kind of run the gamut from, first of all, Democrat and Republican, who run the gamut from new to old. And I mean new meaning, in their 30s to in their 50s and 60s, age-wise, who are just like, man, this job sucks. It just sucks. And if it doesn't get
going to the Democratic side, you mean what Michael Bennet is saying?
Yeah, basically, but also just if you who are just if this doesn't get better, I'll do one more term, but I could spend my life in a more enjoyable fashion. I don't have to do this in this institution where it's just all about nonsense all the time. And listen, I still find a ton of fulfillment with covering Congress. I love it. I think the stories are interesting. I think it's like the American story in many ways. But if you are, think about it. I mean, you know this better than anybody. You're coming here, you're leaving your family for 3, 4, 5 days a week. You have to raise
Yep.
millions of dollars to keep your seed. And you're dealing with such nonsense with censures it's tough, man. It's a tough, and I'm not crying to these people. Like, we all have
No.
free will in this world, Chuck, and we could all
Right.
do what we want. They're choosing to be here, but some of them are like, yeah, this isn't fun anymore.
Well, Michael Bennet, Democratic senator from Colorado, who looks like he's all but announced his candidacy for governor because he's trashing the institution as he walks out right now. And I say that with respect. I like Michael a lot. He said a critique that has been said for a long time, and it drives me nuts. And he basically said the problem with the Senate is that nobody has any say if you're not in leadership. And frankly, I would argue if you're not in the top leadership. I joke that there are 535 members of Congress, but there are only 4 that matter.
That's how we cover the institution.
It is, and look, you're doing it the way you should be doing it right now. But this is not how the institution should function.
No, and I think that criticism of the Senate by Bennett's a little bit off, because you do have, especially in a narrow.
Senators have some more influence than the average House member.
Yeah,
but
with Trump it's difficult because everything is blue and red, right? Everything is you're either with them or you're against them on everything. You're not really a free agent, but yeah, that's right. I mean, there is nothing. Yeah, I agree with that. In the House, this time it's a little bit different, because in the House, everyone's Joe Manchin right now. Everyone could sway the outcome in the Republican conference, whether it's Anna Paulina.
They're enjoying
Luna.
it, right?
Yeah, sure.
Well, look, it's funny. It's like we have a new type of member. Look, you've been doing this now over a decade. It's a different member of Congress today, right, than it was 15 years ago. Like, the average member of Congress 15 years ago was somebody who, I mean, I don't mean you could stereotype it. They sort of worked their way up to that moment. We now, what do you say? About 25% of the membership now are sort of by happenstance is the wrong word, because they decided to run, but it's people who 10 years ago never thought they'd be a member of Congress. And they said, I'm going to do this, and they can win, particularly on the Republican side.
Yeah. There are not as many like people who have come up through the state legislature or through local county politics and it's people. And again, this is nothing against any of these people, but it's someone like, look at.
I think it's good long term to have a diverse set of life experiences. Like, I'm somebody, I think we need to double the size of the House. I think there needs to be 800 members. We need to uncap. No, I think it's a huge issue. I think congressional districts are way too big. Way too big.
God, I would need to triple the size of my team. You have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who came out of nowhere to become, by the way, quite influential and thoughtful member of Congress on the Democratic side. On the Republican side, you have the same thing. You have people who have just decided to jump into the mix and jump into the fray and get into Congress. And you might not agree with their politics, some of them, but they bring interesting experiences. And I think that's good. And, it's not great sometimes, because you have people who could just basically say, I'm going to dump $2 million of my own money in this thing and I'm going to get into Congress, which, by the way, is allowed. It's maybe, I would argue, maybe not great, but maybe some people would say it is great. So anyway, that it is a different dynamic for sure.
How secretly excited were congressional Republicans that Elon Musk got his butt handed to him? And I say this because when you look at there were two elections on the ballot in Wisconsin. And I think it's very important to note how they were all nonpartisan. One was for superintendent of public instruction and one was for the Supreme Court seat. Elon Musk was obviously all about the Supreme Court seat. That candidate that he endorsed did worse than the Republican endorsed candidate in the superintendent of public instruction. So that tells me that he, not only was there a turnout advantage for the left, not only was there the typical shotgun voter problem, but there was a slice of voters, about 2 percentage points of the electorate, that voted for the Republican side in public instruction, but then voted for the liberal or maybe just simply voted against Musk. I mean, he was clearly a liability in that race. And I know I heard some chatter from some Republicans that were like, boy, the perfect outcome is win both House seats
Lose
and have
Wisconsin.
Elon
Yeah.
face plant. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Elon Musk is making the cardinal sin committing the cardinal sin that a lot of people commit in who come to Washington for the first time and think they could just rule the world, which is he's cutting stuff. And Tom Cole said to me a couple weeks ago, and it was one of the more telling quotes that I've had in this era, which is like, who is he to tell me about the, Justice Department or the U.S. Attorney Office in my district? Like, I know my district. I've been in every federal building and it might not have been U.S. Attorney, but I've been in every federal building in my district, and I could tell you why it matters and why it doesn't. But he's just going in there and axing things. And maybe we should take it under consideration. But and by the way, he's going to be gone probably after 190 or whatever, however many days it is. And let's see what Doge has come up with. I mean, there's no question that this government is fat and bloated and has all sorts of waste, but
sure.
But this is not, I don't know, this doesn't seem like the most efficient, speaking of efficiency, the most efficient way to root some of this out.
I'd argue they're setting themselves back. They're going to make it harder. They're going to have all these, now they have lawsuits. And I promise you, how many government contractors are going to win lawsuits a couple years from now for sort of unpaid contracts or back pay, bankrupt. I mean, you could just picture it. Companies that had to file for bankruptcy, and then they're going to say it's because the government, violated this contract. And, it's just, you sort of realize it's definitely going to happen. Chuck Schumer's, let me ask you this. If there, for whatever reason, was a Senate leadership election today in the Senate Democratic Conference, would Schumer still win it?
Yeah.
Or would would he have a real challenger?
I don't know. He would probably have a challenger, but people are really loyal to him, and they might disagree with him on this thing. And I think Democrats mishandled the CRs, the government funding situation, from soup to nuts, from beginning to the end.
So true.
I mean, they asked for things in the negotiations that were unrealistic. And Republicans have made so many blunders over the years that I've covered in such detail. One of the things they were good at was trying to drive a wedge between Democrats and ask for things in negotiations that Democrats would have a hard time saying no to. Yeah. They would have a hard time defending saying no to. So I do think Schumer would win what Brez always puts it this way. The largest group of people in the Senate Democratic caucus still are Chuck Schumer supporters. And in a 50% plus one race, a secret ballot, I think he still wins.
It sounds like how you would have described McConnell's standing 2 years ago.
Yeah, and that's how we described it then, right? It was just he was still the most popular.
Well, I'll tell you the phrase I like to use: the cleanest pair of dirty underwear in the hamper.
Yeah.
Everybody's flawed,
fair.
But I know that I'm comfortable with that, and it's clean enough.
When they thought, listen, I thought Schumer had a bad hand, and Jeffries had a bad hand, and they didn't. And I would argue, it's easy from the cheap seats. I'm in the cheap seats, probably more expensive than some who criticize, but still the cheap seats. I just think they mishandled it a little bit. I think they should have said, okay, Donald Trump, okay, Mike Johnson, you say you're not going to touch X, Y, and Z in your reconciliation bill. Let's put safeguards around X, Y, and Z in the spending bill so you really can't do it. And then that would have been a winning argument. Of course, that's more difficult, but that's how I would have played it if having watched about 5 million of these fights in my life, is make it, you got to give them something they can't say no to.
At this point, it's hard to predict, anything with this, with the way Trump handles things, but we got a debt ceiling issue coming up. They want to get this tax cut thing. What is the realistic time? I have always assumed that even though they keep saying, we're not going to do what Biden and the Democrats did and let it drag out too long, why does it seem inevitable to me that this is still going, they're not going to get their big, beautiful bill until sometime in October or November.
So, Mike Johnson, and this is a long running disagreement Johnson and I have. I think I'm with you. I think a little bit earlier. I think August recess is the true backstop, but I would not bet any amount of money that they won't go into the fall. $0, I would bet. That they wouldn't go into the fall.
They always do. I mean, right? Like, this is one of those. It's like betting on a 1 seed versus a 16 seed. Yeah, it's possible that a 16 seed can win every now and then. It's happened twice.
Right.
But it's more likely where, I've heard these deadlines. The August recess. Do you know how many times I've heard August recess deadlines?
Agreed.
Obamacare was an August recess deadline. The last tax cut plan was an August recess deadline. That is never a real deadline.
And last time it was December that Trump signed it into law.
And we all know why. They all do have vacation plans in August or Codels. So they won't let it hang. So they're like, screw it. We'll go to September. And then, of course, you got the Jewish holidays and all this stuff. And then suddenly it's post-Thanksgiving and you still don't have your tax cut.
Agreed. And the big problem here is the debt ceiling can come up anytime from May to August. And they want to raise the debt ceiling by $5 trillion, which is enough to get it through the midterms. And first of all, they haven't agreed on that number. There's still plenty of skeptics and doubters and people who are against that number. And I don't know that they could finish it in time. And if they don't finish it in time, it gives a hell of a lot of power to Democrats who will be able to better dictate the terms of the debt ceiling agreement.
All right. Let me get you out of here on this. You and I both went to GW. We're trying to help revitalize GW basketball.
We are doing our best.
Do we think we have a chance, given what we're watching with the mid-majors? You and I have both been briefed on how they're trying to see if they could do this. But you look at all these NCAA Final Four teams and you look at their rosters, right? And a lot of them started out at mid-majors and gravitated to, essentially to the top of the college basketball food chain. There's a part of me that looks at this and wonders, is this trying to take dump water out of a boat that has a hole in it?
So yeah, I wonder about this a lot, and I think, Chuck, a few things. I think number one, in some weird way, if they are willing to spend the money that they should spend, they should be able to put a good program together. Now, that's up to the president of the university, and that's up to the athletic director.
She seems fairly committed to this because she was at Clemson as a provost, saw the sort of what Clemson's football success did for the academic success.
And Chuck, I tell them
it is linked.
I tell them all the time, and I know you do too, because we've had this discussion offline. Mm-hmm. It is the front porch to the university. So either do it, or go D3.
I'm curious, how many members of Congress are going to want to get involved with this mess of how the NCAA, because we all know everybody's college program is sacrosanct to their district, right? So they could easily find a way, and my wife's a big college football fan, and she's been convinced Congress is going to step in simply because it's too much of a mess for it not to have some sort of federal intervention.
We interviewed Charlie Baker a couple of weeks ago at a big conference we hosted in DC, and one of the big. So I don't know that I don't remember exactly what he said, but it doesn't seem like they want Congress to step in.
And of course they don't.
And no, sorry. And realign the conferences or anything like that.
No, they don't want that, but they do want some, right?
Well, they're going to need something on employment status, because if universities could directly pay players, then that calls into question what their employment status is. And there are people.
So they're going to need a waiver and some sort of exemption.
For sure. And there are people who are going to want Congress to centralize or make open NIL deals and give transparency to the process. Because you know what? If you're a player, let's use GW for an example. If you're a player that's coming into GW and GW offers you $200,000 and the player says, actually, Fordham offered me $6 million, like there's no transparency there. And so listen, Chuck, Congress is so bad at all this, and it's a brave new world, and it will take Congress years to figure out how to get into the middle of this.
No, but you do have a few. Blumenthal and Booker have always been trying trying to get involved. Booker being a former athlete,
I know.
but yeah,
It's
no,
tough.
it definitely somebody needs to be in charge. But these are the
And
problems. We have a
listen,
lot of problems in this country.
GW has 2 players in the portal right now. Darren Buchanan, who is a DC kid, is in the
As long as Castro's not in the portal.
Castro, they gotta keep, and they get Garrett Johnson back this year. They will get. I would love them to keep Castro. I like the 2 guards. Hutchinson's good. I like a lot of these guys, and I like the coach. We both like Chris Caputo, my former Miami guy, Chuck. So it scratches 2 itches for you.
Yes, it does.
And
I don't want to talk about that little tournament we participated in Las Vegas.
That was brutal.
It doesn't count. Not everybody was playing. We're not going to talk about it.
It was bad.
Jake Sherman, you're the man.
Thanks, Chuck.
I'm going to overpromise here, but I have a feeling I'm going to be inviting you on a lot. So you better not ghost me.
I will not ghost you. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jake. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Jake. As I said, he knows all the machinations up there. Capitol Hill, if you're a young journalist and you're trying to figure out where should you go to become a good journalist, the single best beat in politics is Capitol Hill. I call it the crime beat of politics because there's always a story walking the halls of Congress, and it's open to the public. You don't need an extra press pass or anything. There's always a story to be found in the walk of Congress. Before we go, most Thursdays, I'm going to try to have a mailbag, going to try to respond to your questions. Given that this is my first Thursday edition, I do have a couple of questions that I had gotten from the website during my hiatus, and I'm going to answer one of them here in a minute. But if you have a question that you'd like me to address, I'm going to try, like I said, I'll take as many as you guys can send from a week-to-week basis, but you can send it to askchuck@thechucktoddcast.com. Again, that email address is askchuck@thechucktoddcast.com. You can go to the website too, at thechucktoddcast.com and click there if you somehow didn't remember the address I just gave you. But let me answer this question. It comes from Jeff Hall. And here's what he wrote a couple of days ago. He wrote this: Signalgate got wiped off the media's windscreen by the third term discussion. While the third term threat does exist, but is obviously down the road, was that just used as a smokescreen to get people to forget about Signalgate and now Gmail? Obviously, Gmail referring to the news that the National Security Advisor and some others in the Trump administration was using Gmail, which is a violation of federal open records policies, etc. Here's the thing, Jeff, is that when it comes to Trump and the various shiny metal objects that perhaps we in the larger press corps chase, the idea that they're planned, I think, is a bit overstated. Donald Trump doesn't plan anything, and in many ways, he's both a reporter's dream and a potential nightmare. What do I mean by that? Donald Trump. Let me put it in these terms. If you know the movie Anchorman, the first Anchorman, there's this great scene where they sort of make fun of Ron Burgundy, and the producers go, he'll say anything that's in that teleprompter. Anything. Well, Donald Trump will muse about any idea you give him. If you say to him, have you ever thought about making Japan the 52nd state? He might say, no, but I'll think about it. And you could immediately turn that into a headline. Donald Trump is thinking about trying to acquire Japan as America's 52nd state. This is assuming, of course, after Canada becomes the 51st state. This is the danger in asking these third term questions. On one hand, if he is actually doing things that are trying to find a legal path to do a third term, that's newsworthy. If you ask him to muse about it, is it a news story, right? That becomes the trap. And it is a very sticky topic, right? The minute it's out there, and you saw, my goodness, there are op-eds everywhere, there are law professors everywhere. And it seems like we have this news cycle about every 3 months. We were having it even the last time when people were wondering, well, is he gonna abide by the fact that he's only going to get one term, et cetera? I am very, I think that reporters ought to stop asking the question. In some ways, you may be coming, the more he's asked about it, the more he talks about it, the more normalized the idea might become. And so, look, it's always been tricky how to cover Donald Trump, which is, do you push the envelope there, get people, do you assume the worst and prepare for the worst? Or do you cover what's in front of you and sort of calibrate on some of the things that you ask? So I will say this, I am, and maybe I'm the naive one, and some of you might chime in here and say I'm being naive. I don't think there's just no constitutional avenue for the third term. Under no circle. I've seen a few legal scholars claim there is. It is not there. The 22nd Amendment says what it says, and then the 12th Amendment takes away the loophole that's been floated, because it says if you are not eligible to be president, then you are not eligible to be vice president. Now, some might argue, well, that when the 12th Amendment language was written, there was no 22nd Amendment. But I think that's quite the reach. And I think it's sort of, it is such a long way away in a convoluted way. I will just say this. If you ask the question to him, you're doing him a favor. Do I think it was planned, though? No, nothing with Donald Trump is planned. I think we've all learned that lesson the hard way. Appreciate the question. I hope you guys send more to me. Again, ask Chuck at thechucktoddcast.com. Who knows? Maybe I'll go live one day if there's so many of them, and we can do a live Q&A if I pick the right moment or the right time. But with that, I'm going to sign off for this episode, and we will be, I will look forward to seeing you on all of these channels the next time that we publish. So with that, I'll see you later until we upload again.